So, on this episode of the podcast, we have Dr. David Lipman, who is running a biohacking clinic in Florida. You know, not a lot of people have clinics like this, but I think in the future, there's going to be a lot more clinics similar to his popping up around the United States. Probably the first guy on the show I actually might go see. So, enjoy the show. We talked a lot about biohacking, his practice, his journey, and I hope you enjoy.
For me, my personal health journey started when I was about 10 years old. I moved to a new neighborhood, and it was the early days of the suburbs on Long Island, and everybody that moved there were coming from the city. So the streets were still like a city street mentality. The kids were older than me. The first day I moved in, some kids started up with me. I was down the block riding my bike. He said, "Hey, get out of here. You don't belong over here," something like that. And so it wasn't a welcoming place at first.
Yeah.
But then I got lucky. A kid moved in next door to me, a couple of years older. His dad was into martial arts, so he'd been doing martial arts since he was like three, and he was like, 2 or 3 years older than me. And so he was working out, in 1971. Nobody was really working out, but he was doing martial arts and kind of took me under his wing. And he taught me about how you can get your body to be stronger, and conditioned, and you can learn how to like use, martial arts to, defend yourself. And his dad kind of prevailed upon me on how like what I ate, what I put in my mouth would also feed that process or work
Mhm.
against it. So he got me off of like Captain Crunch and Wonder Bread and start to eat real food. And
Yeah.
so I was fortunate that I really took to it or that early time in my life, and exercise and eating right became at 10 years old like my thing. And so I would even seek, obviously there was no internet at the time, and on TV there was no real information. So different magazines, or I try to find books more about learning about it. I was just kind of thirsty for that kind of knowledge. And then when I was 15, I had a motorcycle injury and I broke my neck, and ultimately it was a chiropractor that helped me straighten out. And so it took my professional journey into that realm too, and then learning more and more about the body, biochemistry, biomechanics, and really how the body worked, really equipped me to start to, manage my own injuries even better, and learn about how to, restore people. And so a lot of those early years were formative for me in terms of, why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because it's been part of my own personal life journey and personal health journey. And so I've largely throughout my career, and I've also, even from a chiropractic standpoint, I took what they taught me in school and, was eager to adopt new modalities, new technologies, and implement them. And so it was a big part of what I did, my personal journey, and my willingness to sort of think out of the box. It's just my nature, has carried me through to now, almost 40 years of doing this. Not only is my whole chiropractic approach very different from, when I graduated school and how I saw things and how I was taught, but I've also implemented, what today we're calling biohacks, which to me is
Hmm.
just things that are tapping into the body's best regenerative capabilities, and boosting them. And it comes down to two things, in my opinion. You're either removing obstacles to the body doing its best work, or you're fortifying deficiencies, and usually both. And because the biohacking industry has given us the self-awareness that the medical community that we've been relying on has not been that effective in really helping us to manage. So in my way of thinking, we now have the ability to invest in the continued incline of our health, well-being, and health span, instead of just managing the decline, because we've kind of been taught we just manage the decline. You live your life, and when
Yeah.
something breaks, the doctor, but we know that doesn't work. So that's kind of how my personal health journey, and kind of transition into my professional health journey, because a lot of people like myself were plagued with either musculoskeletal things, or in this day and age there's so many, especially since the pandemic, there's so many health issues that people are suffering from the environment we live in, the toxins, the pollutants, things that are affecting us, in our guts, and in our ability to make energy, ATP in the cell. So all the things that I focus on here, in addition to the chiropractic, is all the modalities that I've adopted to measure where those deficiencies are at the cellular level, whether it be nutritional or energetic, and then implementing modalities and lifestyle changes for people so they can learn how to manage themselves day to day, and improve where they are now at baseline, and that translates to a much better functioning, healthy, and happy person, because I'm in my mid 60s now, and so I've been
You look
doing.
great. You look great for 60s,
Thank
by the
you.
way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's great, but looking pretty in the mirror is not my motivation. Feeling the way I do every day, that's what my motivation is to continue to feel this way. And then I become, I wouldn't say an inspiration, but a model for my patients to say, well, if this guy can do it, I can do it. You just have to be willing to do some of these things to make it part of your lifestyle. And again, make that investment. You can't think of healthcare as an expense. You got to think of it as an investment because, you
Yeah.
know, the bottom line is that most people are dying for the last 10 years of their life, and it doesn't have to be that way if they choose differently.
Yeah, and I think people are really waking up to that. I know like alcohol is people are drinking a lot less alcohol now. People are taking, longevity focused, biohacking. Even our Caesar Health CEO is a biohacker as well. In his late 30s. Shuker, you can look him up. He's always doing some biohacking as well. These tech guys, they like the data when they have like an Aura ring and you can track the data. It becomes a bit of an
Yep.
addiction, I think, for them because they're turning themselves into tech in a way. But like, do you have like Dr. Lipman's like secret sauce? Like, is there like some knowledge you have that you think could be super helpful to the general public?
Yes, and metrics are important because otherwise you're kind of flying blind to know what you as an individual might need. So I come down to some basic testing where in terms of where we start, and one of them is a genetic test on what's called methylation, or how each individual converts the raw nutrients from food or even supplements into the usable form because many of the nutrients we need, we can't use it in the form it comes from food or supplements. We have to what's called methylate it. And that's where we're able to convert it into where our cells can actually use it. So this methylation process or cycle happens about 1 billion times a second in every one of our cells. So you can see how that's very impactful to every organ system because it
Mm.
affects how we make hormones and neurotransmitters and amino acids and B vitamins and detox pathways, all those things. And because many of us have these mutations we were born with, that's a really good metric for everyone to have. In fact, I believe everyone should get that from their pediatrician from the first visit because it's going to impact, their
Mm.
nutrition, and their parents could have that information because it will affect which food you should and shouldn't eat. And those kinds of things are important for an individual to know, for their lifestyle and their lifetime. Second thing is that we look at the nutrition, about 50 nutrients, not in the bloodstream, which is what most blood reporting is looking at, but actually inside the cell. Because most people don't realize this, but when we're looking in the bloodstream, what we're seeing is about the last 72 hours of our life. There's no long-term,
Mm.
information for what that little snapshot looks like. But when you look inside the cell, you're seeing about the last 6 months. So you're much more able to see what's truly deficient, and it's inside the cell because it's inside the cell that these nutrients are doing their thing. In the bloodstream, they are not. So if your vitamin D levels are sufficient in your bloodstream when you measure it, it doesn't mean they're sufficient inside the cell. That goes with magnesium, potassium, and all the other nutrients. So having that information every 6 to 9 to 12 months as a repeated test is very important because then you can know from a nutritional standpoint, whether it's supplements or food, what do you need to focus on to maximize that part of your cell functioning. So that's that part. The other thing is we do something that actually tests mitochondrial efficiency or how well we're making energy. And because everything that happens to us starts at the cellular level. The cell is the most basic unit of function. So regardless of what the tissue is or the organ system it's a part of, it's always the cell. And the fact is a lot of people, especially these days, are not making energy sufficiently to support that cell structure, that tissue function, and that organ function. In fact, we've had over 32,000 diseases that we've identified in humans. And the one common denominator in every single one of those diseases is a loss of energy at the cellular level. Now, that says to me, we have one problem, loss of energy from the cell level, and we've got 32,000 symptoms depending on what the tissue and the organ system is. So if each one of us knows what our mitochondrial efficiency is, we're able to know, do we have a nutritional problem that we need to reinforce the mitochondrial membrane? Are we full of free radical damage? Do we need to do red light therapy or molecular hydrogen? Or are we having a trouble from implementing our oxidative phosphorylation from our glycolysis? So there's different ways, and these tests reveal where the deficits are. And so there's action steps. So for me, I like to start there to see what's the baseline for somebody and then figure out what they need next. What are the supplements? What activities do they need? We have like Superhuman Protocol here, which it combines pulsed electromagnetic field exercise with oxygen therapy and then very, very powerful red and near infrared light therapy. And so that three-step process upgrades ATP
Wow.
production by like 16 times. Now we've added molecular hydrogen to it, which is the most powerful antioxidant that exists. And most of our lives are screeching to a halt biologically because of the environment we live in today has so much oxidative stress from free radicals and molecular hydrogen. And hydrogen is the smallest molecule we know. It's the first one on the periodic chart. So it can get into every single tissue of ours, every cell structure, into the mitochondria. So all the things that are damaging us, it'll actually neutralize and basically turn it into water. So it takes the thing that's harming us the most and turns it into something that we need very much. So again, these are some general things that many people utilize, but we also do stem cells and exosomes if somebody's been degenerated at the musculoskeletal level to a certain point where they need some of that structural support.
Mm.
We also use some other modalities that help with some of the adhesions and myofascial issues that people really don't realize are the bigger cause of the musculoskeletal pain, more than the herniated disc, more than the torn labrum, and some of the other things that are typically blamed for, the pain issues. So again, I really try to look at the individual and see what their needs are. So the secret sauce really is individualized because I realize that we all function a little bit differently, and there's definitely not a one size fits all for this kind of stuff.
This is like cellular therapy, but also I know that you're a chiropractor. Like, how much of the practice is practicing chiropractic? I don't even know if that's a word. And then the cellular stuff,
Chiropractic,
like,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
so I've heard that one before, chiropractic.
I don't know.
A lot of people say it, so it must be a thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
clearly, clearly.
it's always been the access point. This is where most people initially access me because of some kind of pain issue. So some of the challenges I have is that first of all, I'm not a typical chiropractor. My approach is different. So there's a big educational, need for me to explain, what's different about my approach and why they can come in here with, an ankle issue and not just a spinal issue, or, carpal tunnel syndrome, or, jaw issues. All those things are part of what I deal with. So, but I would say the majority of people do access me for that. However, I do really start to dig down into somebody's health issues while I'm with them and figure out like what else might they be dealing with that they wouldn't think to ask me about. And in fact, over time, I've been changing some of my intake forms to help bring some of that stuff out so I can actually have a question to ask specifically, as opposed to, it's my shoulder pain I'm coming into. Oh, but by the way, I've been having gut issues for years, or something else that might turn out to put the light bulb in my head that there's other avenues we need to explore, because again, most people wouldn't think that it's even something they could talk to me about. And
Mm.
so we also do, because of some marketing we do online, some funnel systems, we're driving people in just for red light therapy, because a lot of people are looking at red light therapy now more than ever. A lot of people never even heard of it a few years ago when we
I
had,
was
because we've
looking
been.
into it a couple of days ago, actually, funnily
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very common that people are now looking at those things. A lot of them listening to podcasts or seeing ads on Instagram and stuff. So we'll use that as some way to get somebody in here for, inexpensive first time try. And through that process, introduce them to all the other things that we're doing. In fact, we're implementing a whole AI process now that as soon as they become a lead in the system, we have a very interactive AI that's going to really take them down the whole road of everything that we have here. So by the time they actually come for that red light session, they're well versed in all the other things that we have here.
And that's
So
awesome. That's
yeah, and
awesome.
so that's one of the things I love about AI. It's going to give us that, capability, because otherwise in the past, I've had to be the one to kind of, they think they're just coming to a red light place, and all of a sudden there's all this other stuff here, and really educating people, because then you're lighting up a light bulb in their head to say, something, wow, there's something that sounds like I can help me with this part of my life, or here. And then even with the red light itself, some people come in because they got shoulder pain, but the red light bed is not enough to really take care of it. There's more to it, but it at least gets them in the door. But again, we're starting to transition now, and we've just rebranded too, because honestly just I don't want to be just a back pain guy anymore. There's
No,
so much.
I could see that. I could definitely see that when
Yeah.
I looked at your
But
LinkedIn.
you have to communicate that, to the public, because, for years, my biggest challenge was number one, I'm a chiropractor, but I'm not a typical chiropractor. So people automatically think, I'm the neck and back pain guy, which I'm not. Number two, I could take care of things throughout the entire body, head to toe, musculoskeletally. And most people would not going to look at me for rotator cuff, syndrome, golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, those things. And number three, we don't take insurance because insurance really doesn't pay for the process that I've developed here, where we're able to, manage all those things. So those have always been the challenges. But now the challenge is that we have all these other things to help give somebody the empowerment to manage themselves through their own self-care system, and minimize the chance that they're going to need some of the things that they would typically go to a doctor for, because they're able to do this on their own largely. And that's the blessing and the curse of the biohacking world, because if you as an individual, Ben, listen to three different podcasts, you can say, oh, do this is a good thing, or do this is a good thing. Well, from that, you're not going to be able to really know. You need somebody to guide you to know all about you. And you can't get that from a podcast. You need that from a professional that looks at that whole global view of you, and that can better assist you in managing what is it really that Ben needs for his body. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's the blessing is the biohacking world has opened up the knowledge and the awareness of a lot of these things, but it can't be the place where people are going to get all their info. You can't drop your health insurance because you're watching a bunch of podcasts. It's a transition time.
Yeah, that's something that the CEO of Caesar Health told me. I asked him a biohacking question. He said it really depends on you. It's your body. You're not the same as everyone else, so it really depends what's tailored towards you, and you're hacking your own
Yeah,
body effectively.
right. And it's important to know that, because, as an example, biohacking could be detrimental to a particular individual if the integrity of their mitochondrial membrane isn't there, because that increase in drive of ATP production could cause that mitochondria to be destroyed.
Mm,
It's called apoptosis. And because the integrity of the membrane is not there, because the nutritional piece that needs to be in place isn't. So again, by testing those things, you can know, okay, is this person can just go willy-nilly on biohacking, cold plunging, infrared sauna, methylene blue, NAD, all these things, or do we have a better understanding of really what their particular needs are? And that's really important, because biohacking, as I said, can work against somebody if they don't know that about themselves.
yeah. So it is kind of the operators. The whole point is to talk a little bit about like operations as well. You mentioned it's cash based. It's in Florida. You're a very New York guy. I got a very New York aura from you. How did it end
Yeah,
up
yeah.
in Florida? Is it on purpose? It's in Florida, or what?
Well, it was really my wife. My wife's from Southern California, and
Uh,
we were living in Connecticut at the time. We had four young kids, and we would come down. My folks were snowbirds, meaning they would stay down here, 4 months out of the year in the wintertime. And so when it was winter in Connecticut, New York, we would come down and visit them for a week. The kids were off from school the winter break. And back in 2005, and we were here in February. My wife looked at me, was sitting by the pool here in February, and it's beautiful. And she's
yeah,
like, and she grew up in Southern California, so she loved the Northeast. But only 3 months out of the year it's nice. The other 9 months it's cold, it's gray, it's rainy. And so she said, let's take a move. Let's move down here. And so I was like, all right, let's do something new. And so we did it. It took a little time to sort of figure things out, and in a lot of ways, we're still figuring things out in terms of expanding our businesses down here. But we made the choice 20 years ago, and it's been great. For the most part, our kids grew up down here. The lifestyle really lends itself to an all year round type, where people are really seeking to do the things that we're doing. She's a very high end hairstylist, and I mean, she's book solid. And you can imagine,
Mm.
because down here they're out all the time. They want their hair to be perfect as well as other things.
Yeah, of
And
course.
people want to be healthy all year round here too, because it's nice out. We don't have the winter months where you're kind of hibernating. It's 12 months out of the year it's bikini weather. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Floridians take care of themselves, especially like South Florida.
yeah,
Um,
Southeast Florida. We're in Boca Raton, West Palm Beach, Fort
yeah,
Lauderdale, Miami. It's bodies are more exposed, so to speak. You don't have that
yeah,
winter
yeah, yeah.
coat
Of
to cover everything up, so it kind of lends
course, of
itself to
course.
that. I mean, I go to the gym at 4:30 in the morning. There's probably 30 people there, doing their thing. as part of their lifestyle. A lot of younger kids, in their 20s and 30s, but some, guys in my, age category in their 60s, some in their 70s, because you'll find a lot more people active, in these decades of life here because of, I think, the way um, the environment just kind of promotes that. Now, that being said, there are people, 10 and 20 years older than me that, need a walker and an oxygen tank to go to a restaurant,
Hmm.
and that's the contrast of, the older end of the baby boomer generation. I'm on the younger end of it. And, they didn't have the advantage of having some of these lifestyle things that I was able to be exposed to at a younger age. So they never took care of themselves in that way. And, their last decade of life is very difficult. Whereas people that are a little bit younger, closer to my age, and then behind me, your generation and people in between the both of us are much more aware of these things, are willing to invest in them. And like you said, people are drinking less alcohol, and you're just taking more of that lifestyle stuff that's going to be more supportive to them feeling good every day. And it is much more popular down here than I'd say it was up north.
What's your like just for my own curiosity, like what's the worst stuff I could do as a young guy? Like the absolute just worst.
Um, what's the worst? Well, it depends on which part of you value the most.
My body, just like physically, just like
Yeah, well,
fast
there's
food,
yeah. I
smoking.
mean, if you want to go to food, we have to stay away from the processed stuff. We have to go to whole foods. Whole foods are the things that grow naturally, but you have to know what those sources are too, because there's so much in the vegetables and the fruits because of fertilizers and pesticides that are just putting horrible toxins into our bodies. And also, with the animal protein too, you got to make sure they're not shut up full of hormones and antibiotics, and they're not corn fed, because all the corn in this country for the most part is GMO, modified, and that stuff gets
Yeah.
into us. So we fortunate we have various farmers markets on here. We have farms here that they do farm to table kind of stuff. So you can get some really high quality animal protein and produce that's, completely void of that stuff. And we've really tried to, for the last, 15, 20 years, focus on, getting those kinds of sources. So look, I used to love eating pizza and, Italian heroes and, all that kind of stuff, but I just don't anymore because the absence of that stuff makes me feel so much better. And I work so hard to feel good that I don't want to ruin it by, putting some of that stuff into my life, because it will affect me. So I would say that's a big part of, those things. The other thing I would say is making sure you get enough hydration. And hydration is not just water, it's electrolytes too. Because a lot of people don't realize it's just not the water we drink, but it's the minerals that need to bring that water inside the cell, because that's where the water is needed to help the function of that cell. So it's not just drinking, what the old tell us, 8 glasses of water a day. You need electrolytes, because most people aren't getting
Mm.
them because the nutrients aren't in the soil anymore from the food that we do eat. And we're not drinking well water, so we're not getting water from the ground. And which leads me to the next thing, which is the plastics. You got to avoid plastics at all costs. You can't be drinking
Mm.
plastic water bottles, because plastics and microplastics have been ridding havoc, have been reading that. You know what I'm trying to say?
I
Causing
know.
havoc inside
Wreaking
our body.
havoc. Yeah.
Yeah, wreaking havoc. Thank you. I couldn't think
Yeah.
of ridding. No, wreaking havoc.
Wreaking havoc
And
and chiropractory. That's all right.
chiropractic, right? So, a lot of guys for the first time in history in this country, they're getting low testosterone in their 20s. And a big part of that is because of the products that we have in plastic are causing these estrogenizing problems in young guys. I mean, guys should be losing testosterone until like they're in their 50s, but there's a lot of young guys that are suffering right now because of that. So if you can switch over to stainless steel or glass for all your drinking water, that would be a big thing to help you from a
Mm.
hormonal standpoint, and minimizing plastics, because plastics cause wreak a lot of havoc throughout our
Yeah.
body systems, our kidneys, our brains, our livers. And so that's, another thing as a younger person to just become more self-aware of. So those are the big ones. Of course, exercise, that should go without saying, and just getting exposure to the sunlight, the oxygen outside, and the ground, the earth, the ground. The whole superhuman protocol is based on the grounding that the earth gives us, but we're not getting that living on concrete slabs and wearing rubber soles on our feet. And all this wireless networks and all our technology and our electrical grid is causing these high high frequency electromagnetic fields that are completely disrupting our physiology in terms of how we process nutrients, get them into our cell, remove waste products, how we carry oxygen. So that's another big one, making sure that you get outside and get grounded, unless you have like a PEMF mat at home. Breathing oxygen with deep breathing, things like Wim Hof breathing to get enough oxygen, much more than people are usually walking around getting, and getting sunlight, because a lot of people are completely, not getting that sunlight, and light drives a lot. That's why, the red light is such an important thing. If you're not getting enough sunlight to drive that, energy production at the cell level with it. So those are like some basic things that as a young person you can benefit from if you can manage to figure out, okay, how do I put this into my lifestyle? So it's removing some of the obstacles and then fortifying some of the deficiencies that keep you from functioning, as well as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. I learned a lot from this podcast. I'm just thinking if there's anything else worth mentioning. Um, well, if people want to find you, like where's the best place to reach you, or do you have like a blog or your LinkedIn?
So we have a URL, it's physicalevidenceconnect.com. Physicalevidenceconnect.com will take you to that section of my website where people can put in their information. There's some drop-down menu about certain questions, but there's a custom box that can ask me a question that comes right to my email. And so, and I welcome people to do that, because there's a lot of things, even if they're not here in South Florida, that I can help them with, to get some of the information about themselves through some of the testing that we could drop ship to them. And that's really valuable information, and you learn a
Mm,
lot. You learn about your own biochemistry, and that's real empowerment, because it's going to give you more specifics. Just like your boss said, it's everybody's not the same. So when you can learn those things about yourself, you'll be better equipped to know which one of these things will be most beneficial to you, and which ones are you better off not even getting involved with.
yeah, and I'd love to visit the clinic next time in Florida. I'd love to come by. I'd love to do some tests. I think it'd
You're
be great.
invited. I love bringing people
Uh,
through here. It's really cool stuff.
yeah, we have some clients in Florida. I don't know when we'll probably go and visit them eventually. We're
Hmm.
waiting to launch some tools, and then we'll go and get some testimonials probably eventually. But
Right. You mentioned that in the
yeah,
beginning. Sure.
yeah. We got a lot of clients in Florida. Not none in Miami, but in more in Tampa, around Tampa.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah. I mean, Florida's big, Tampa, that whole West Coast, Sarasota area, and, the Gulf area. There's a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of people, just like here in Southeast Florida, that are very interested in all these things. It's flourishing, because a lot of people are going there, either to retire, or they're snowbirds, and, that this wellness activity is starting to, really take foothold, in that part of the state as well.
yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Lipman. I appreciate it. You look like you're ready to go to war. When you hopped on the call, you look like I've never met a doctor that looked so ready for battle. So,
Yeah, I tell my patients, we're at war with the environment every day, so we got to soldier up, and we have to be, stronger to get through our daily lives. People don't realize it, and I believe it's true, that you need to be an athlete for your everyday life. Mine's pretty physical, because I'm on my feet. I'm working with people's bodies. I'm picking them up and moving them, and manipulating them around, and doing a bunch of stuff. And so you need the energy and the strength so you can do that, and do
yeah,
it at a high level. But yeah, I couldn't imagine living any other way. But thanks for the compliments. I know that they're there, but
yeah,
it's the best reward is feeling good every day, and I have to say I honestly do.
yeah. No, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good talking with you, Ben.